So just to kick things off, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional background, how you got where you are today?
Okay, sure. So, and as we were saying, please feel free to jump in with any questions or if there like anything in particular that you want to hear about that can really guide my responses. Feel free to share that. We can go over that. And yeah, it's always kind of hard for me to explain exactly how I got to where I am. So I feel like it was very much of a straight path. It's not like when I was a little kid, I was like, I'm going to be a bank executive. So yeah, it's when I was little, I thought I was going to be an English professor. For a while, I think I changed my major 7 times. I worked full time to put myself through my undergraduate degree. And actually, so I have 3 college degrees, and I work full time actually to put myself through all of those. So it took me a little while to get things done, but I ended up getting a bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Utah. And then I went to school at Westminster College, now university, and got a degree in professional communications. So I have a master's in professional communications, which then I always tell people I got that prior to social media being a thing. So as you can imagine, communications is a very different world prior to social media than after that. So while I was getting that degree, and or shortly after I had that degree, I was working as a marketing communications director at St. Mark's Hospital. And we were sitting in there in the corporate boardroom saying, "Do corporations do social media? Is this something that we do? Is this just something that kids have a MySpace page? Or should we have a YouTube page? Like, why do we do that? Should we do that?" Type thing. And they actually went through an IPO. So they were a private company and sold and went public. And they were looking for drastically different skills that I had than I had at the time. We're looking for much more hard marketing skills. And so I decided to go back to school and get a third degree. I got my MBA. So I did the executive MBA program also at the University of Utah, which was really great for working professionals because you take one day off of work every week and one day off. I guess your home life the weekend, and so it's like 16 hours of school, every couple of weeks to finish that. So started my career at Fidelity Investments. So I worked there for 9 years. Started as a file clerk back when they used to have paper, filed things in paper, and I just kind of took every opportunity I could to advance my career. Not even sure what I was doing prior to starting my career there. I worked at Starbucks. I was a barista. I helped to open the very first Starbucks here in Utah, which was fun, and I loved it. And my mom told me I needed to get a real job, and so she actually she worked at Fidelity Investments, and gave me my paper application to fill out. She handed it in for me, and that's how I got my first job. About right. But like I said, I worked there 9 years. I got promoted 6 times. And my last position there, I was working as a communication consultant, where I would go out to nonprofits and colleges like this one, and churches and other nonprofits, and help them with their retirement plans, their communication strategy for their retirement plans. So, and then I mentioned I worked for St. Mark's Hospital. And so after I was done working at Fidelity, I pivoted and went and worked for healthcare for 5 years. And so worked, like I said, marketing communications in for-profit healthcare, which is a very different field than finance, as you may imagine. And then, was essentially laid off of my job, not having some of the skills that they were looking for, and went back to school. So while I was going back to school, getting my MBA, I also had a tiny baby at home at the time. So I decided to kind of take a step back in responsibility, and I decided that I wanted to work directly for nonprofits. So I've always had a passion for the community and giving back. So I worked for the YWCA Utah, which there's YWCA's in all the different cities and states have different focuses depending on what the needs of the community are. Unfortunately, one of the big needs in our community is a domestic violence shelter. So about 70% of the work that the YWCA Utah does is domestic violence assistance. And so I worked there for 2.5 years in their communications and fundraising department. So it was fundraising. I had to do their social media, so I couldn't get away from it. Learn how to do that and put on big events for fundraisers. And then when I graduated with my MBA, I was recruited by Susan G. Komen, which is a breast cancer research nonprofit. And so I was the second ever executive director for Susan G. Komen Utah for 2.5 years. And had the, I don't know, so we'll call it the fortunate or unfortunate experience of having to close down our state chapter because we ran out of money. So we were one of 40 chapters in the nation going through this problem. So it wasn't just unique to Utah, but that was a very difficult, but very informative process. And so after that, I decided I did not want to work for nonprofits, at least for the foreseeable future, and just did some contract work. I did some adjunct teaching up at the University of Utah. I taught business communications and I taught consulting for nonprofits, and also just did some work for our Utah Nonprofits Association. And until I was hired at Bank of America. So when I found out Bank of America is fairly new to Utah, if you guys didn't know that, we've had Merrill is our investing arm, and they've been in Utah since the 1940s. But which Bank of America acquired them in the financial crisis back in 2009. And we had a couple of employees in our business banking and commercial banking areas, but other than that, we just didn't really have a presence. And so in the fall of 2018 was when they started hiring people for these roles, and so I applied and just for any position that they had open. So it wasn't like I was waiting, like looking for my next executive position. Like I need a job, I need to get back to work. So I helped open our very first branch in Draper, and so that opened in January of 2019. And then they named us as what they call a market. So in finance and banking in particular, anywhere that organizations, banks accept money from the public, they take deposits. They're subject to a law called the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977. And that act specifies that once you are taking money from your community, you are legally obligated to give back to your community. So that's through board service and through grants in the community and other ways of helping people, making sure that they have an opportunity to have education and that they're getting financial literacy and all those types of things. So my job was created, and due to the history that I've had, in both corporate and nonprofits, it was a really good fit for me. And so I was asked to apply for that role. And I have been in that role now for about 6.5 years. So kind of a mouthful, but there you go. There's my professional trajectory.
Well, since you've had such an expansive and varied career, what would you say are the differences between working for a nonprofit and working for a corporation?
I'd say the biggest difference is resources. That has been my experience, but it definitely varies based on the size and the complexity of the nonprofit. And I get frustrated a lot of times when there's a misunderstanding when people think that nonprofits aren't about making money. So the nonprofits are businesses just the same as for-profits are companies are businesses. It's just a tax status. So whereas for nonprofits, you're not looking to pay back shareholders and do reinvestments in that, you are expected to at least break even, and to make the money that you need to operate and to provide the services that you need to operate. But definitely for smaller nonprofits, you're doing everything. So there is, let's say, an IT department, and administrative assistants, and other resources to do it. You're the person that does all of that. And that was a big shock for me coming from corporate, and I had a friend I became friends with, a woman who ended up being my boss at the YWCA, and she just laughed at me, and she was like, "I'm not sure you're cut out for this." She's like, you're the one that needs to do this. There's not somebody else to do this. It's you. Yeah, that's you too. Yeah, and that's you too. So I would say that's the biggest difference. But depending on the work that you do, I would say there's also I'd say another more positive, rewarding difference is that there's more of an opportunity to give back, I guess, and to see the direct results of the work that you do helping the community, depending on the mission of the nonprofit.
Well, Kate's told us a little bit about her story. So let's take it out to the students. What questions at this point do you have for me?
I was gonna ask, how do you feel, I guess, strong professional relationships with all that? Since obviously, yeah, we have good relationships and I guess now that I say that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, some people are surprised to find out that I'm actually an introvert, which I guess the true definition of an introvert versus an extrovert is kind of where you get your energy. Whether or not you get your energy, from other people, or if you get more of your energy by kind of recharging and spending time on your own. But the corporate relationships, I'd say, are kind of similar just to any relationship that you make. I'm a very curious person, and I'm very interested in other people, and so that has always been something that has driven me. And my second role at Fidelity, after I was the file clerk, I was a receptionist at the desk, and it gave me an opportunity to sitting right in front of the main doors. I got to see every employee who came in every morning and every visitor who came in. And it was just a nice opportunity for me just to get to know people, even if it was just a little bit at a time, and building some of those relationships over time. So I'd say take an interest in other people, find out what they are interested in, what matters to them, and share a little bit about yourself, and be vulnerable, and help other people. I'd say when you're helping other people, they may have more of a tendency to help you in return, and you never know where some of these relationships will help you later down the line. I always tell people I'm a near native. My dad was in the service when I was born, so I was born in Utah, but I've lived here since I was one. And I've lived everywhere across the Wasatch Front, as far north as Ogden, and as far south as the northern part of Utah County. So I've run into a lot of people that's different iterations of their career and my career over the years.
Great. Let's see. Who else has a question?
Yeah, I had a question. In my accounting class, I recently had a classmate who tried to get an interview with KPMG, the accounting firm, and he wasn't even able to get the interview because now they're looking for like 4.0 GPA students. And I'm wondering if you've noticed possibly in your company or field, if companies are maybe raising their standards because of AI and the erosion of entry level positions. Are companies getting more stringent?
That's a good question. I don't know that I've noticed that as much, as far as I guess what I would call the numbers criteria. I think sometimes it is hard to to break through that barrier because of AI and things that are going on there, which honestly I'm still learning a lot about. The I would say continue to learn about how AI works in the system, whether getting your resume together, making sure that you have an online presence, and creating sort of a positive digital footprint for yourself, such as LinkedIn, things like that, having posts, engaging with other entities in the community. My recommendation would to continue to be noticed and to try and get a foot in the door is to be a little bit well-rounded, rather than just folks, having that 4.0 is being able to tell more of a comprehensive story about yourself. Both of my parents are first generation college graduates. And I always knew that I was going to go to college, but I didn't know where. I looked at going to college out of state a little bit, but it wasn't really something that was, in I guess in the cards or expected of me. I think sometimes the employers that I have had or have interacted with, I think I get a little bit more, I guess, credibility or I don't know what to say, credit for the fact that I worked full time. While I was going through college, it wasn't, so maybe I had a slightly less privileged background in that respect than somebody who may, have a full ride scholarship or, have funds from their parents to not have to work during that time. I'd say, being able to be authentic and vulnerable about your background and your resources, but then also your interests. Like if you have causes that you're interested in and support, having that piece to tell your story, I think is also really important. And I guess those were the recommendations that I would give to try and help mitigate some of that stuff. All the while still teaching yourself about how do the AI springs work. But I think this comes back to the networking thing too, is to continue to talk to people and find out who works there. Is there a way to bypass some of that? Do you have? Is there do your parents have friends? Or do you somebody you work with have friends or colleagues or somebody that could introduce you? I think internships are really really valuable, things like that. So that's the advice I get about that.
Great, thanks.
For sure.
Yeah, please.
Having a question more related to your current position, in the bank, with your current role. I work for a credit union.
Okay.
When I was hired and we were doing like our training and everything, very much like they told us all the difference between banks and credit unions and how we function different with different things. If you were to talk to me about like getting into banking or like the benefit of working for a bank or for a credit union, what would you say that are like those things for you? Like how do you see them different and beneficial from the employee side of for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna say a little bit of a difference between banks and credit unions is again the tax status. So credit unions are considered nonprofits essentially, and banks are not. They're for-profit entities. So a lot of credit unions, as you may know, are smaller in scale, and there's been a lot of loosening of regulations over the years for credit unions. They used to be pretty strict that to belong to a credit union, you had to have a certain affinity. So let's say what's the one that's coming to mind? Navy, Federal Reserve, or something like that. You had to be a member of the military service to be a part of that, which I think that's still true. But yes, university credit union. So a lot of credit unions like that, you had to have some sort of affinity or relationship to, your membership, I guess, to belong to those. Whereas a bank, you need to have the, decent credit score and the minimum amount of money to start. So I'll start there. I guess some of those regulations have been softened. So we have some very large credit unions, as you may see, American First Credit Union or Mountain American Credit Union, which are very large in Utah. I'd say the difference between working for like a credit union and a bank is probably scale. There are different sizes of banks. There are community banks, there are regional banks, and then there are national banks, and there are global banks. And Bank of America is the second largest bank in the world. So for an employee, I would say the biggest difference or opportunity would be, what do you want to do with your career, and how many options do you want? Do you want to go work overseas? For a while I thought I want to go work in Switzerland. I want to work for Bank of America in Switzerland, and obviously there's not an American First Credit Union in Switzerland, so that's that will be one of the differences. There are more opportunities to have a similar role. So it's, should there be a similar role like mine, let's say at American First Credit Union, there's probably one of those in the entire credit union. For my job, there's one of my job in Utah, but there are 97 ones of my job across the United States. So I would say it depends on how mobile you are and what kind of position you want to have. So it's really just kind of scale. Other than that, I would really look and see what kind of culture the organization has and whether or not that matches the values and the career that you are looking for.
So on that note, when you interview or you're looking for a company to work for, how do you determine what a culture is?
Yeah, that's I think you can. That's interesting. That's a very interesting question, and I think that's very important. Sometimes that's hard to determine. So again, with the networking and getting to know people, because I think the most authentic way to find that out is to talk to people who work there, and just to find it. Do people like it? Do people not like it? What do they like? What don't? I mean, work is work. There's always going to be tasks and things that you don't enjoy. That's just life. But what is it like when you go into the office? How do they treat their clients, customers? What's their problem resolution resource? Do they have any ethical issues that they're dealing with? So, I'd say in this case, the internet is definitely your friend. To look and see what kinds of things are people saying about these things. Do your research that way, and look at their website. Obviously, I'd say sometimes that's a good reflection of an organization, but it also depends on you could have let's say a really fabulous IT person that makes the company look better than it is or sound better than it is. Based on the skills and resources that they have for IT. So I'd say just talk to people and find out what they think, and compare that with your own values and what you want out of your life and your career.
What other questions do we have?
Just a quick question. What is like a day in the office like for you?
Sure.
As the architect.
Yeah. So I always tell people none of my days look the same. Which is true, I'd say, but there's obviously some sort of regular cadence that ends up occurring over time. So the when I try to explain my job to people, and I tell them, so I'm one of the senior leaders in Utah. There are 3 of us here that work together to make sure that all of our lines of business are working together as one, instead of 8 little companies working in their own silos. So we are responsible for KPIs, dashboard, making sure that all the employees in all the different business lines are referring business to each other. So let's say there's a business banking client who needs, a personal banker, so making sure that they introduce that person to the personal banker. And so part of my job is doing, those mundane things of, okay, how many of our, referrals that were referred over, did the business close? What percentage did that close? And so once a month, I get all of our line of business leaders together in a meeting, and we go over all of this. And some of it is as granular as that. I mean, obviously, we stick to the strategy of how's everybody's business going? Who are who are your top targets? Who are your top clients? Is everything going well with them? What can we do? Can we do a better job with them? How can the rest of the colleagues help you succeed in your business? How are your employees doing? How are you engaging in the community? That type of thing. And then so the other, so there's definitely that business strategy type of component to my job, and there's also the community component to my job. So the Bank of America Foundation gives each of the Bank of America markets a pot of funds in the local market to distribute out into the community. So I definitely spend a lot of my time talking to nonprofits, government leaders, and other influencers in the community to find out what the issues are in our community. So which is obviously I've had a passion for community and what's going on and what makes a healthy community. For us, it's just something I've been interested in my whole life. So I'm lucky that I get to be able to work with some of these issues in my career. And so I knew about, as I mentioned earlier, that Utah has a higher rate of domestic violence than most other states in the nation. Because of the work that I did there. I know that we have a large homeless population. I mean, probably everybody knows that, continues to rise as you watch the news and you drive around, and if you've lived here for some time, you've seen a change and increase. But I know that too because I'm meeting with the heads of the homeless shelters and meeting with I'm going to forget his title, the homelessness czar, Niederhauser, that was, employed by the governor's office. So having those types of relationships, so I know those types of things, and then work with the nonprofits that are doing the work to help fix that. So when I spend time looking into their financials and their impact reports and things like that to see are they good candidates to donate money to out of our foundation. So managing like reputational risk is a big part of my job. So if we're writing big checks, I want to know that the organizations that we're writing checks to are doing good work and they're not about to go out of business. Which I have some personal experience with. So so as you can imagine, there's not like I don't go to my office and sit at my desk and have 7 meetings and answer emails and go home. Some days are like that, yes, but some days I come and speak to classes like this. Some days I go to fundraising galas and learn about what other nonprofits are doing. Some days I spend days teaching junior achievement curriculum to kindergartners. So few of you may have seen me talking to Mario, who's the head of the Salt Lake Community College Foundation here, which the Bank of America Foundation has given money to the Salt Lake Community College Foundation, and we have a nice relationship with Salt Lake Community College. So it's and he said don't be afraid of the students, and I said to him I'm more afraid of kindergartners. Teaching 20 kindergartners financial literacy is scary to me than sitting in front of you guys talking to you somehow further. So it varies. It's very different.
What's the next question? Yeah.
Going back to like kindergarten, you think like I guess because you talked about financial literacy, I guess do you think like they should change how they talk about finances when in like K-12 and below, I guess?
Yeah.
As a whole.
That's a really great question. I would say yes. Utah does a decent job of this. Utah was actually the first state in the nation to mandate financial literacy in schools. So I'm very proud of that for Utah. And I mentioned junior achievement, which I think has a really good reputation in our state. And Bank of America has a great relationship with junior achievement. Bank of America actually has our own it's called brand, if you will, of financial literacy that we teach. We generally don't teach it. It's called Better Money Habits, and it was a relationship that Bank of America created with the Khan Academy. And maybe you're familiar with Khan Academy. And you can. The resource is free and available to the public. So if any of you are interested, I would strongly recommend you check it out. So it's just Better Money Habits. Honestly, I can't remember. It's .com.org, and it's terrible, and I should remember that. But we're not allowed to use, I guess, that curriculum until like later middle school, high school. So we partner pretty strongly with Junior Achievement to start that. And so I've been telling my family like hey, I'm going to teach kindergartners about financial literacy. Like, what can you teach them? Like, what does that look like? And which I think is a really great question. So in some of that curriculum is, teaching them the difference between needs and wants, and teaching them what's a bank, what's money, and what's a service, what's a product, and what is savings? Why should you save? And so I think just normalizing those conversations earlier are really important, and to consistently have those over the years at an age appropriate level is really impactful and useful. And I joke with the kids, and a little bit serious, a little bit joking of, hey, sometimes I still need a reminder what's a need and what's a want, and I'm 15-year-old, that is a daily conversation, so are fake eyelashes a need or a want? Like, we have different opinions on that, but so I would say yes. And being able to continue to have that conversation, I think, is a game changer. To me, I think it's the biggest secret to somebody's lifelong success. That if you don't have I'd say the basics, and then continue to build on your knowledge about how money works, how the financial system works, that's the biggest thing dividing haves and have-nots. And the more that you can educate yourself and learn about how money works and how your money can work for you is the biggest predictor, I would say, of your own personal and familial success.
So going a little bit with that and everything, right now, like the general feeling that I get like from a lot of people here in America is that we're heading to a recession or even to a depression. Some people get to say. With that, I know that the financial system is the one affected, right? Much as recession, like consumer spending is less. People are more delinquent in their loans. We are not able to help businesses grow, and all of these other different things. Do you think that with us like heading towards? Well, first of all, do you think that we're heading towards one? And second of all, if we're doing that, do you think it's a good moment to lean into a career in the financial system? Do you think that there's going to be big changes that will come with a recession now in the modern times? Like, what are your thoughts on a recession in the near future?
Yeah. So first I will say I'm not an analyst, so I'm not going to predict whether or not we are headed to a recession. I think that changes frequently with a lot of world situations. Anytime there are wars that go on, big global events, there's an opportunity for economic unease. So over time, the financial system goes up and down, goes through recession, goes through recovery, building, inflation, stagflation. There's a whole you get into it and study it. It's always cyclical, and the biggest thing I would say to protect yourself from any of that is to make sure that you are saving. That having emergency funds to take care of yourself. The recommended rule of thumb is that if you are only supporting yourself, that you should have 3 months of your expenses saved that you have access to at any time. That's not invested in a way that you can't get to it quickly. If you are responsible for family or other individuals, having 6 months of your expenses saved is a better indicator for you. So having that emergency fund, paying down and getting rid of debts is always a really strong place to be, regardless of the financial situation. As far as careers in the financial industry, I think that careers in financial industry are good careers to have. Right, the period that we're heading into, when you study much about generations, the baby boomers are in periods of retirement, and so we have started and are on the cusp of what is considered the biggest wealth transfer industry. So having a career helping that generation pass on their wealth to whether or not if they have family and pass it down, if they maybe don't have family that they're passing it down to, they're leaving it to other nonprofits, if they're selling businesses, things like that. Those are areas where there is a big need. So I would say it depends on what area of finance you're looking at. I would say continue to pay attention to what sort of roles are being either are going away or becoming smaller because of some of the AI rules, because that's definitely a thing. I mean, that's going to be a thing in all industries, but I would pay attention to that. But leading into some of those roles that if finance is an industry that you are interested in, leaning into the roles and opportunities where relationships really matter, and being a trusted expert for people who are looking for guidance of what to do with their money and take care of themselves, their businesses, and their families. This is a great place to be.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I never really considered myself like a book smart, like an overachiever with math. I struggle with math. I've taken an Excel class this semester. It's probably the hardest one I have.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you think in the finance world there's space for people like me who maybe aren't? I'm not stupid, but not,
Yeah.
Does it take all types or?
Absolutely. I'll be a little bit vulnerable here and just let you know that I mentioned that I wanted to be an English teacher when I was a kid, and that I can do math, but I always tell people I can't do math in my head. Like I was you. I came and sat in the front row, and I made sure I had no distractions, and I asked a lot of questions, and I was that nerdy kid in middle school that like took summer school on purpose because I wanted to know what I was doing, and math was hard for me. And accounting was hard for me. I failed my accounting class the first time. I had a degree in the social sciences, and I went in my first accounting class, and I'm like, what do you mean I have to, I lose money when I get a credit, and I get money when I get a debit. I'm like, that makes no sense to me. Like it for so long. I'm like, okay, explain it again, explain it again, explain it again, and so after going through accounting a couple of times. And now I'm studying for my certified financial planner certificate, and I'm like so glad that I took my 2 accounting classes, and can understand that. So I would say yes, that it's especially as there's so many tools and there's so many automation. Like as long as you understand the concept and you're willing to put in the time to do it, it doesn't need to be something that comes naturally to you. Like I said, there are so many different areas where you can focus. Whether or not you are like, building those relationships, if you're having more on the relationship side, maybe if maybe being an analyst wouldn't be the top choice for you. Definitely not the top choice for me. I probably wouldn't be seeking out roles as the chief financial officer. I can do it. I can prepare profit and loss statements, and I can read them. I understand all of that. Do I love it? No. I'd much rather be writing checks for grants and working with my line of business leaders, finding out like how can I help you take better care of your employees. I love working directly with our employees. How can I help you grow your career? Like, what are your strong suits? So, I spend a lot of time working with our bankers and advisors, learning about what are their passions. They come and talk to me if they want to get a board seat in the community. And some people will come and say, I want to work in the community because I want to get more clients. And I said, okay, that makes sense. Like, what are your passions? And there haven't been too many people. There've been 1 or 2 that say, I don't really have any passions. I just want to make money. And I just say, come back when you're ready, because I'm not just going to put you on a board to just to meet people so that you can make money, because you're not going to show up, you're not going to do a good job, and you're not going to be a good representative of our. So, but those individuals who they know where they want to plug in, and I'm happy to talk through it. Maybe they don't have exposure to it. I didn't really have exposure to it until I worked at Fidelity. And one of the roles that I had there was in the public affairs department. And so my role was to source volunteer projects for all 2,500 employees that worked in the Salt Lake City office. And so then I would organize those volunteer activities and just, I'm like, all right, who's coming to pull weeds at, Miss Jones' house on Saturday? She can't come out of her house. Who's going to help me donate teddy bears to Shriners Hospital for the kids that are coming in for surgery. And so you might not know, but I'm always so happy to give them experiences and share some of my knowledge, and let's try that. Okay, you hated that. All right, let's try something else. Our market president doesn't love. We're being recorded. He doesn't love working for the junior achievement. He doesn't love teaching the kindergartners and doing all those things, and that's fine. So let's find the person who does love that. So finding a place to help people, it's another area. There's so many different paths, and so I would say yes. Keep looking, keep trying. It's not always going to be a good fit. I mean, there have definitely been roles, and there still are job duties. Like I said, there's still work. There's still parts of my job that I don't love. But yeah, check it out and see.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, please.
Would you say that there has been a mistake or failure earlier in your career that taught you something essential about leadership or even just growth?
Should we flip that around too? So should we say mistake and or success?
Oh, I'm
But
happy.
yeah, no, that's
You
okay.
tell every
Yeah,
time
no,
I'm
I'm still talking about that. So you know, I shared, I'll share a couple with you. Um, the So, you know, I mentioned my first professional job was at Fidelity. And I had a great career there and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And loved the people, loved the culture, and was doing well. And like I mentioned, I was promoted 6 times in the 9 years that I was there. I made a really stupid decision to quit my job. Thinking, you know, I was in my late 20s and just thought I could get another job if I want. You know, I decided like I want to move across the country, and you know, just told my boss, you should let me work from where I want to live, and the answer was no, you can't. And I said like, I can find another job. It's fine. So I quit my job without having another job. Stupid mistake. Um, don't do that if you can help it, seriously. Um, uh, so that was hard for me. I wasn't gone very long, and I came home, wanted my job back. They weren't going to give me my job back, and so I. It took me a while to find another job, and it was I had a short job. I didn't mention it earlier. I had a very short job at a computer industry. It's a family-owned computer tech company that was not a good cultural fit for me. And I frequently, it was a bunch of bros and me, and they were like, "Are you wearing heels and a skirt?" And I'm like, "Because that's what you wear to work. Why are you wearing shorts and flip flops?" Like it was just like this, you know. We were not on the same page. So I was one of like 2 women in the group, and it wasn't a good fit for either of us. And I again quit my job without another job. Um, right on the edge of the financial crisis. So I did not have a job for 6 months, and it was scary. It was really, really scary. You know, it's my dad is of the persuasion that he's changed his mind a little bit or grown. I'll say he's grown a little bit, but at the time, you know, didn't think that women should be working anyway. And so, are you so glad that you get to stay home and be a homemaker? And I'm like, no, I am stressed. I have bills. I'm like, you know, I want to work. Like, no, I'm not happy about this. So that was hard. I blew through my savings that I had and had to dip into my 401k. Which is also don't do that, not a good decision. So, you know, having to, you know, but at least I mean I had something that I could, but you know, having to get back that into you know, pay the bills, but the earlier you can save and the longer you can let it compound, the better off you will be. So that I would say that's definitely you know, a few of the mistakes that I have made over the years, and I've tried to learn from that. So I never again voluntarily left a job without having another one lined up. Yes, I have had several interruptions in my career was my own doing, or you know, market circumstances of you know going through the IPO at St. Mark's Hospital. They're part of Hospital Corporation of America, which they were private, a private company that doesn't answer to shareholders, and then they sold went public, and very different set of metrics, and you know just nothing. It wasn't anything I did wrong. It was just they were looking for something different. You know, same thing with the Susan G. Komen of Utah closing down. It was a series of events, both on the corporate and the local side, and years of decisions that put that in the place. And it wasn't, you know, I wasn't the only one who lost that job. Everybody who worked there lost their job. And so I would say what I've learned from that is to also have a backup plan. To make sure that you have that emergency fund, that emergency savings. Take every opportunity that you have to learn something new. Stay curious. So it's if anything is interesting to you, keep building your skill set. It's I never thought that or sought out, do I need 3 college degrees? Does anybody need 3 college degrees? No. But it was more of a fact of, what am I gonna do next? That I think it's so great. I think there are more options now, I would say, than there were I would say even 10, 15 years ago, to continue to build your skills, whether that's getting a professional certificate, even just like taking an Excel class, are are you advanced? Because you'll get those questions when you go through that interview process, like what is your skill set? Are you proficient? Are you advanced? Are you an expert in whatever software skills? Kind of keep yourself up to date on what's coming. Make sure you know how to use the Google Suites, which is a deficit that I need to learn, mostly because we don't use it at the bank because it's not safe enough. That there's a lot of security risks that come through Google, so I haven't used it in 7 years. And I should. I should be teaching myself this anyway, even though I'm not allowed to use it at my job. So stay up to date, stay curious, have backup plans.
Well, we're out of time, but you have shared some wonderful pieces of advice. We want to learn about your career, the do's and don'ts, successes and failures. So we really appreciate you coming and spending your time with us. Thank you very much.